All right, listener name. Ready to dive into something kind of cool today. We're going to tackle the Spanish subjunctive. And before you tune out, think of it this way. It's like learning a secret code for Spanish that lets you talk about doubt, desires, emotions, all that interesting stuff.
It's true. It can seem a bit intimidating, this subjunctive thing, but really it just helps you be more specific and careful with what you want to say.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You can get the basic meaning across. But to really nail it, to get that feeling right, that's where the subjunctive comes in. And you've sent in some excerpts from 61.txt to help us out. They go deep on how to use the subjunctive with certain verbs.
And the cool thing is, 61.txt focuses on how when certain verbs come before the word que, which means that, they actually tell you if you should use the subjunctive or the indicative in what comes after.
Wait, hold up a sec. For those of us who hasn't looked at grammar in a while, what do we mean by indicative again?
Good point. The indicative is like your basic everyday verb form. It's what you use for simple facts, like the sky is blue or I eat pizza. No confusion there.
Got it. So the indicative is our starting point. Nice and simple.
Right, but then in comes the subjunctive, adding that something extra.
Okay, so let's break down these verbs that are like warning signs for the subjunctive. Where does 61.txt start?
Well, it starts with when you're talking about what someone believes or thinks, or those phrases like, it's obvious that, or it's likely that.
So we're talking about opinions and how people see things.
Exactly. And 61.txt gives this clear example. Let's say you've got a friend, Luis, and you're talking about if there are tickets for a concert. To say Luis believes there are tickets, you'd use the indicative, like, Luis cree que hay entradas para el concierto. Luis believes that there are tickets for the concert. Simple, right?
Yeah, makes sense. But what if Luis isn't so sure about those tickets?
That's when the subjunctive comes to the rescue. If we want to say Luis doesn't think there are tickets left, the doubt the sentence becomes Luis no cree que hay entradas.
So that little no before cree, believes, changes everything, and we're in subjunctive territory.
Exactly. It's like flipping a switch. And it's not just cree, to believe. Lots of verbs about opinions and perceptions are like this. Considerer, to consider. Notar, to notice. Parecer, to seem. They all work this way.
So listener name. What we're seeing is when you want to say there's doubt about what someone thinks, the subjunctive comes into play.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, 61.txt doesn't stop there, does it? It also talks about phrases showing certainty and then ones about lies or doubt.
You're totally right. And this is where it gets even cooler. The subjunctive loves anything that's not just a normal fact. Like, if you want to say it's true that or it's clear that, you'd stick with the indicative. Those are certain. No need for the subjunctive there.
Makes sense. Certainty equals indicative.
Yeah.
But what about when it's not so certain?
Well, if you said it's doubtful that or it's a lie that, boom, subjunctive time. You're adding uncertainty or questioning the truth. And that's when the subjunctive shines.
So doubt, uncertainty, lies. The subjunctive is all about expressing things that aren't for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It helps you talk about those gray areas with more detail. And you see it all the time in how people actually speak Spanish. It's not just grammar rules. It's how native speakers really talk.
We're not just talking about like doubting things right now or in the future, right?
Mhm.
This whole subjunctive thing gets even trickier when we talk about the past.
You're spot on. The past tense adds a whole other layer. But it also makes the subjunctive even more useful. Think about it. When we talk about the past, it's usually stuff that's already happened. But what if we're still a little unsure about it? What if we don't know for sure exactly how it went down?
Okay, I see what you mean. Give us an example. How does the subjunctive work when we have doubt about something that already happened?
Let's go back to our friend Luis and that concert.
What?
Say the concert was last night, and you want to say you doubt Luis actually went. You could say, dudo que Luis haya ido al concierto anoche, which means I doubt that Luis went to the concert last night.
So even though the concert's over, done, finished, we're still using the subjunctive because we're not sure if Luis was really there rocking out.
Exactly. And did you catch how the verb haya ido is that present perfect subjunctive? That's how we connect going to the concert, which happened in the past, with that feeling of doubt.
Man, this is making the subjunctive feel less like grammar and more like a way to look back in time, like you're adding a question mark to history.
Exactly. And it's this subtle stuff that makes the subjunctive so important for speaking natural Spanish. It's not about memorizing rules. It's about talking the way native speakers do.
I'm starting to get why mastering this is like a Spanish superpower. But before we move on from 61.txt, there's one more thing I noticed. It mentions some exceptions to these subjunctive triggers.
Ah, yes. Those tricky exceptions. Every language has them. Wouldn't it be fun without a few curveballs, right?
Right. It's like every rule needs its loopholes. So which rule is breaking the rules this time?
Well, 61.txt calls out the verb negar, which means to deny, as being a bit of a rebel in this case.
Rebellious verb alert? What do you mean? How does it break the rules?
It means that sometimes you can use either the indicative or the subjunctive after negar, and it doesn't really change the meaning much.
Interesting. It's like the language is giving you options here. Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say someone thinks you're from a different country, but you're not. You want to deny that. You could say, niego que soy extranjero. That's the indicative soy. Or you could say, niego que sea extranjero. Using the subjunctive si, they both basically mean, I deny that I am a foreigner.
So it's kind of up to you which one to use in this case.
Yeah, it's like choosing between two paths that go to the same place. You decide which one feels better.
I love those little quirks. It's like the language itself is giving you choices about how to express yourself.
That's what's so cool about language. It's not always about strict rules. There's often more than one way to say something.
Oh.
And knowing these subtle things makes you a better communicator. But listener name, we've been hanging out with 61.txt for a while. It's great for these grammar rules. But remember, you also sent us some really cool stuff that looks at the subjunctive in a whole different way.
That's right. Let's switch gears and check out our next source. It explores the more emotional side of the subjunctive. So this next source you sent is a web page called When to Use the Subjunctive. 5 verbs. And this one seems like it's going to take us straight to like the emotional core of the subjunctive.
For sure. This source makes it clear the subjunctive isn't just some random grammar thing. It's about getting at those deep human experiences, hopes, desires, fears, wants. And it shows how those emotions are built into how Spanish works.
It's like the subjunctive is how you say I feel you, but in Spanish, right?
Exactly. And the best way to see these emotions is through certain verbs that go hand in hand with the subjunctive.
And when to use the subjunctive. 5 verbs focuses on 5 key verbs. Decir, to desire, esperar, to hope, necesitar, to need, querer, to want, and prefer, to prefer. These are all about what we want, what we need, what we hope for ourselves and for other people.
And that's the key. When you have these verbs of wanting, needing, or hoping, and then you see cue, get ready, the subjunctive is about to show up in the next part of the sentence.
It's like those verbs are sending up a subjunctive bad signal.
Right. Or let's say you're working on something and you really could use some help. You might say, necesito que alguien me ayude con este proyecto. I need someone to help me with this project. The verb ayude is in present subjunctive, showing that feeling of need.
So basically, if you're talking about what you want, need, hope for, or even prefer, the subjunctive is the way to go in Spanish.
You got it. And this link to feelings and what we want is what makes the subjunctive so strong in Spanish. You can say so much more than you could with just the indicative.
It's wild how this one little verb change can totally change how a sentence feels.
It really is. And to me, that's what makes learning the details of a language like Spanish so awesome. It's like you're figuring out secret codes to deeper meaning and how to express yourself.
Well said. So, listener NA, we've covered a ton in this deep dive into the Spanish subjunctive. We started with how certain verbs kind of trigger it, looked at how it adds doubt or uncertainty, and even saw how it can show your deepest hopes and desires.
And remember, learning a language never really ends. The more you see these patterns, the more they'll feel natural. Don't be afraid to try things out, make mistakes, and have fun with it.
Exactly. Keep exploring, keep practicing. And who knows, maybe you'll even start dreaming in the subjunctive.